My wife cheated with our estate lawyer, stole $200, $0 from our joint account during our divorce, and now she's trying to claim the house, despite the fact that she's been secretly living with her ex-boss who paid her $150, $0 in hush money. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where everything I believed about my marriage would come crashing down in such a brutal way. It all started with what seemed like minor signs, little things I brushed off at first. My wife Lisa had always been a bit bitchy, but lately she'd become downright hostile for no apparent reason. She'd snap at me over nothing, cancel plans last minute, and started spending a lot more time out of the house. At first I thought she was just stressed, maybe overwhelmed with work or some personal issue. But then I noticed her phone was constantly locked, and she'd hide it when I came near. She also started dressing differently, more revealing, more provocative, and I couldn't help but feel a strange, sinking feeling in my gut. One night, I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower. I know, trust is supposed to be the foundation of a marriage, but I had this gnawing suspicion that something was off. I found messages from a number I didn't recognize, and they weren't just casual texts. They were flirtatious, suggestive, talking about meeting up. My heart started pounding. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after building a life together, she was cheating on me. I had no idea with whom at first, but then I discovered her affair was with our estate lawyer, Mark. That was a punch to the gut. How could she sleep with someone who was supposed to be helping us with legal issues? It felt so betrayed, so sickening. The worst part was the timing. We were in the middle of a divorce, and she was still sneaking around. I'd always thought she was a bitchy, manipulative woman, but I never imagined she'd actually cheat on me with the very person I trusted to help us settle our affairs. It was like a slap in the face. I felt so stupid for not seeing it sooner. The signs were there, her secrecy, her evasiveness, but I never wanted to admit it. Now I was staring at proof that she'd been lying to my face all along. And what made it worse? I found out she stole $200, $0 from our joint account during the divorce process. She'd been draining our savings, planning to run away or just take everything she could. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I knew I had to confront her. The next day, I arranged to come home early from work, and I waited until she was in the kitchen. She was pouring herself a glass of wine, and I just blurted it out. "Lisa, I know you've been cheating on me. I saw the messages, you with Mark, our lawyer. How could you lie to me this whole time? And what about the money? Did you really steal $200, $0 from us?" Her face twitched like she was caught off guard, but then she put on that fake, bitchy smile she always uses when she's about to lie her ass off. "Oh, honey, you're overreacting. Those messages are just friends talking. And the money, you're imagining things. I've been faithful, I swear. You're just paranoid." I felt my blood boil. Knew she was lying, but hearing her deny everything made me even angrier. I couldn't believe she'd go so far as to deny the obvious. I showed her the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, the texts, and her facade cracked just a little. She started to stammer, then suddenly, she was crying, claiming she was under stress, that everything was a mistake, that she loved me and didn't mean any of it. But I knew better. I'd caught her, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. The betrayal cut so deep that I felt like I was drowning. I'd trusted her, built a life with her, and she'd been secretly living with her ex-boss, someone who paid her hush money to keep quiet about their affair. That moment was the turning point. I realized I couldn't just sweep this under the rug or pretend it was just a misunderstanding. My wife, Lisa, was a liar and a thief, and she'd been playing me for a fool. I decided then that I had to take control of the situation. I didn't know exactly what my next move would be, but I knew I couldn't stay passive. I'd been betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, and morally. The pain was overwhelming, but beneath it, there was also a burning desire for justice. I had to figure out how to get back what was mine, and maybe, just maybe, make her pay for what she'd done. That's when I started digging into her affairs, her finances, everything I could find. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, but I was determined to find out. The first thing I did was go through our bank statements more carefully. Her secret withdrawals, the payments to Mark, the hush money from her ex-boss, David. That's when I discovered she'd stolen a staggering $200, $0 during the divorce process. How could she be so cold, so calculated? I felt sick. I realized she was not just cheating on me. She was actively destroying our lives, tearing apart everything we had built. I knew I had to act fast. The betrayal was still fresh, and I needed a plan. I couldn't let her get away with it, especially not with the house, which she was already trying to claim despite everything. I had to think about how to turn this around, how to make her regret every lie, every betrayal. I didn't want her to walk away with our house, with the money, with my life. I was just getting started, and I knew the worst was yet to come. The more I dug into her financials, the more I realized just how deep Lisa had gone. She wasn't just cheating on me with Mark. She was actively planning her escape, and with the money she stole, she was trying to secure a new life for herself. I found bank transfers, secret accounts, and even some offshore transactions. It was clear she'd been orchestrating this for months, maybe even longer. The $200, $0 she took wasn't just a random act of greed. It was part of a calculated scheme to leave me high and dry. And she was doing it all while pretending to be the loving wife, the devoted mother, the person I thought I knew. I was furious. Not just sad or betrayed, I was furious. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach every time I uncovered a new lie. My mind kept circling back to her living with her ex-boss, David. I knew about the hush money, that she'd been paid $150, $0 to keep quiet about their affair. I couldn't believe she'd been so reckless, so blatantly dishonest. It was like she was trying to erase me from her life, replacing me with her new lover and a pile of stolen cash. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? And more importantly, how could I let her get away with it? I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and let her take everything. I started plotting my revenge, how to make her feel the pain she inflicted on me. I didn't want her to walk away with the house, the money, or her new life with David. I wanted her to understand what betrayal really means. I wasn't planning to just divorce her and move on. No, I wanted to make her regret it, make her pay for every lie, every stolen dollar, every moment she pretended to love me while secretly plotting her escape. First, I contacted a private investigator. I needed proof of her living arrangements with David, her secret meetings, everything. I also needed evidence of her taking the money and her dealings with Mark. I knew Lisa was good at covering her tracks, but I was determined to get everything on record. Meanwhile, I started gathering my own legal counsel. I wasn't going to let her claim the house without a fight. The house was our joint property, and I knew the law could work in my favor if I played it right. The pie came back with some shocking footage. There were photos of Lisa and David leaving a hotel late at night, holding hands, kissing. They looked completely comfortable, like they had been doing this for months. The evidence of her affair with her ex-boss was irrefutable. I also found out that she'd been secretly living with him in a rented apartment, paid for with the hush money, for over a month now. That was the final nail in the coffin for her story that her relationship with David was just old friends catching up. She was lying again, and I had the proof. With this new evidence, I made some calls. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in divorce and property disputes. I wanted to know what my options were. I also started drafting a plan to freeze her assets if she was hiding money or trying to transfer ownership of the house. I needed to stop that immediately. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after what she'd done. I was ready to fight for what was mine, my house, my money, my dignity. The more I thought about her lies, the more I realized she had been manipulating everyone around her. She'd lied to her friends, her family, even to the lawyer Mark, who, by the way, was just another pawn in her game. She told him she was separated, but she was secretly living with David. She convinced Mark to help her drain our accounts, to forge documents to cover her tracks, and she paid him off with the stolen money. That's how sick this whole thing was. She was a master manipulator, and I was just starting to see the full picture. I remember sitting alone in my living room, staring at the photos of her and David, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. I was enraged, but also numb. I kept asking myself how I let it get this far. How did I not see the signs? I thought I knew her, but I was only fooling myself. Now I was faced with the reality that my wife, my partner, had betrayed me on a level I never thought possible. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, legal, and personal. And I knew I had to fight to get my life back, to reclaim what was stolen, and to make her pay for what she'd done. I was ready to take her to court, to expose every lie, every secret. I had the evidence, and I knew the law was on my side if I played it right. There was no way I was going to let her walk away with the house or the money without a fight. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about justice. And I was determined to see it through, no matter how dirty things might get. Once I had the evidence from the pie, those photos of Lisa with David, the bank statements showing the offshore transfers, and her secret living arrangements, I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Relief because I finally saw the full picture, and rage because I'd been blind for so long. She'd been lying to me from the start, playing her game while I was clueless, pouring my energy into a marriage that was already dead behind the scenes. That rage fueled me, made me more determined to fight back, to take control of this mess she created. I spent the next few days talking to my lawyer, a guy named Tom who specialized in divorce and property disputes. I explained everything, her affair, the stolen money, her attempts to claim the house. He was furious too. Told me that she had no legal right to the house since it was jointly owned, and that her hiding assets or transferring property would be considered fraud. But he warned me that if she was actively trying to transfer ownership or hide money, I'd need to act fast to freeze her assets and get a court order. Meanwhile, I called my bank and placed a freeze on all accounts linked to her. I also hired a forensic accountant to track her financial trail more thoroughly. I wanted to make sure I had every dollar accounted for, especially the offshore accounts she'd opened. I knew she'd be trying to hide more money somewhere, maybe even trying to transfer ownership of the house to her name before I could intervene. The last thing I wanted was her walking away with everything, especially after what she'd done. I also reached out to a real estate lawyer about the house. I wanted to know my options if she tried to claim it. Turns out, since the house was in both our names, I had a strong case to keep it, especially since she had no legal claim to it independently. But I knew Lisa. She was sneaky and manipulative. She'd probably try some underhanded move, maybe claim she was the sole owner or that the house was a gift from her parents. So I needed to prepare for that. I started gathering all the paperwork, proof of our joint ownership, the divorce papers, the bank statements showing her theft, and the evidence of her affair. One day, I caught her trying to transfer some funds into a new account, probably to hide the money further. I was already on high alert, so I called my lawyer immediately. We managed to get a court order freezing her assets, and that was a huge win. I also hired a process server to serve her with legal notices about the freeze and the proceedings. I wanted to make sure she knew I was serious. This wasn't going to be a quick, easy divorce where she could just walk away with everything. As I pieced everything together, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of clarity. All those years I thought I knew her, trusted her. Turns out, she'd been planning her escape for a long time. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they all made sense now. She'd been trying to keep me in the dark so she could get away with everything. I realized she'd been living a double life, cheating, stealing, and lying while I was oblivious. I also uncovered that her affair with David was more than just a fling. It was a full-blown relationship, one that had been going on for months. She told him she was separated, but she was actually living with him in that apartment paid for with hush money. That's when everything clicked even more. Her whole story was a lie, her tears, her apologies, her claims of innocence, all fake. She was just trying to cover her tracks, to buy more time before I found out the truth. I started to feel the weight of everything she'd done to me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but also burning with a need for justice. I knew I couldn't just sit around and let her get away with it. I had to prepare for the court battle, for her to pay for her lies and betrayal. I was already planning my next moves, how to prove her fraud, how to push her to the edge, how to make her regret ever crossing me. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about holding her accountable for the damage she caused, emotionally, financially, and legally. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my life, my savings, or my dignity. I was determined to fight tooth and nail, to take back what was mine and make her face the consequences of her actions. I knew this was only the beginning, but I was ready for the fight. I'd come too far to back down now. The court proceedings moved quickly once I had all the evidence lined up. My lawyer, Tom, was relentless. He knew exactly how to navigate the legal system to expose her lies and protect my interests. The moment I handed over the forensic accountant's report, the bank statements, and the evidence of her affair, the judge saw the pattern. A woman actively trying to hide assets, cheat me out of my rights, and rewrite the story to suit her own escape plan. Lisa, of course, everything at first. Her usual bitchy attitude came out in full force, throwing tantrums, crying crocodile tears, and insisting she was the victim. She claimed I was paranoid and that all her money was legally hers, even though I had proof she'd stolen from our joint account. She insisted her affair with David was just old feelings, and that she'd never intended to hurt me, just trying to find herself, she said. Yeah, right. I could see through her lies like glass. She was a master of manipulation, but I had the evidence to blow her story apart. The judge wasn't buying her bullshit. We filed for a temporary order to freeze her assets and prevent her from transferring ownership of the house. I also requested full disclosure of her finances and the offshore accounts she'd opened. That was granted within days, and it was a huge blow to her arrogance. She was panicking. Her usual bitchy attitude was replaced with a frantic, desperate energy. She knew she was cornered. Meanwhile, I moved to secure the house. Since it was in both our names, I filed a motion to keep it in our joint ownership, arguing that her attempts to claim sole ownership were fraudulent, given the evidence of her secret living with David and her theft of our money. I also had a forensic appraiser come in to evaluate the property, ensuring I had a fair market value to use in negotiations or court. I was determined not to let her get away with pulling some sneaky move to take the house while I was fighting to prove her fraud. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to a share of the house because she contributed to its mortgage payments, but I had bank records showing she'd been funneling money into her secret accounts, not paying the mortgage. It was clear she was trying to muddy the waters, but the judge saw through it. The evidence was overwhelming. In the meantime, I confronted her directly. I told her I knew about her affair with David, about the hush money, and about her theft of our savings. I told her she could lie all she wanted, but I had the proof. Her face twisted with anger and frustration. She spat at me, calling me a jealous fool, claiming I was just paranoid and that I was ruining her life. But I wasn't about to let her gaslight me anymore. I knew the truth, and I was ready to fight for it. One night, she lashed out at me during an argument, trying to manipulate the situation, claiming she still loved me and that we could work things out if I just forgave her. That was the final straw. I looked her in the eye and told her that her lies and betrayal had already destroyed any chance of reconciliation. I told her she had to face the consequences of her actions, losing the house, paying back the stolen money, and facing the truth of what she'd done. That was when she finally started to crack. Her bitchy mask cracked and she looked genuinely frightened for the first time. I saw the cracks in her facade, her tears, her desperate pleas, her attempts to manipulate the court. But I was prepared. I had the evidence, I had the law, and I had the resolve to see this through. I knew she was trying to spin everything to her advantage, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The judge scheduled a full hearing, and I knew this was going to be the decisive moment. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting to restore my dignity and hold her accountable. I had learned that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. But I also learned that truth and evidence are powerful tools. I was ready to use them to make her face the consequences of her betrayal. I knew this story wasn't over, and I was prepared for whatever came next. The court date finally arrived, and I was more prepared than I'd ever been. All my evidence was laid out: the bank statements, the offshore transfer records, the photos of Lisa with David, the proof of her living arrangements, and her attempts to transfer ownership of the house. I sat there feeling a strange mix of calm and fury, knowing that this was the moment everything would come to light. Lisa looked nervous, her bitchy attitude replaced by a tight, defensive silence. She tried to spin her usual stories, claiming she was misunderstood and that I was just jealous and paranoid. But the judge wasn't buying it. My lawyer, Tom, presented all the evidence systematically, pointing out the inconsistencies in her stories. He argued that Lisa had actively engaged in fraud, hiding assets, transferring property, and living with her ex-boss in order to cheat me out of my rightful share. The judge listened carefully, nodding as the case unfolded. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she tried to deny everything, claiming she loved me and that the affair was just a mistake. She insisted she had a right to the house because she contributed to the mortgage payments. But I saw right through her lies. I took the stand next and laid out everything I had uncovered. I told the court about her theft of $200, $0, her affair with David, the hush money, and her attempts to transfer ownership of the house. I explained how she'd been manipulating everyone around her, including the lawyer Mark, to cover her tracks. I made it clear that her actions were not only illegal but also deeply hurtful. I wanted the court to see her for what she really was, a woman who'd betrayed her vows, lied to everyone, and tried to steal her way out of her mistakes. The judge examined the evidence, asked Lisa tough questions, and finally made a ruling. She ordered a full division of the assets, including the house, and declared that Lisa had no legal claim to sole ownership. The court also ordered her to pay back the stolen $200, $0 plus interest, and to cover legal fees. It was a huge victory. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing that justice was being served. But I also felt exhausted, emotionally drained from the months of fighting, lying, and betrayal. After the court, Lisa was furious. She cursed, threw tantrums, and tried to argue her way out of everything. But the judge's decisions were clear. She was ordered to vacate the house within a month, and the property would be split according to the court's ruling. I finally felt like I was getting my life back, but I knew the emotional scars would take longer to heal. I was angry, but also relieved that I fought for the truth and won. In the weeks that followed, I started the process of moving on. I sold the house, split the proceeds with her, and cut all ties. I also filed for divorce, finally freeing myself from the nightmare she'd created. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of betrayal. She'd lied and cheated her way into my life, and now she was paying the price. I realized that trust, once broken, leaves a scar that never fully heals. But I also learned that justice can be achieved if you're willing to fight for it. Looking back, I see how naive I was, how I let her manipulate me for so long. But I also see the strength I found in myself during this fight. I learned to stand up for what's right, to trust my instincts, and to never let anyone betray me without consequences. If there's one thing I want others to take away from this, it's that honesty, transparency, and integrity matter. Because once those are gone, everything else crumbles. And sometimes you have to fight dirty to get justice. That's what I did, and I'm finally starting to rebuild my life, piece by piece. After everything, I've come to realize just how much betrayal can shake you to your core. I thought I knew Lisa, thought she was the woman I married, the mother of my kids, my partner in life. Turns out she was a master manipulator, a liar, and a thief. The process of uncovering her lies, fighting her in court, and finally seeing her face the consequences was exhausting but necessary. It's strange how life throws these brutal lessons at you, and only afterward do you see the full picture clearly. I won't pretend I've fully healed from this. There's a lingering bitterness, a sense of loss for the years I wasted trusting someone who never deserved it. But I've also learned something invaluable: the importance of standing up for yourself, of fighting for what's right, even when it seems impossible. I've lost a lot: money, trust, the marriage I thought was forever, but I gained clarity. I learned to be more cautious, more aware, and more resilient. In the end, I'm grateful I had the strength to fight back. I refused to let her walk away with what she didn't deserve: my house, my savings, my dignity. I learned that sometimes the only way to prevail is to face the uncomfortable truths head-on and to hold people accountable for their actions. It's not easy and it's not pretty, but it's necessary. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for yourself. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. And sometimes the only way to move forward is to confront the darkness and come out the other side stronger. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I know I'll be okay. Life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning from it and becoming better. Lisa's betrayal was a brutal chapter, but it's also taught me the importance of integrity, honesty, and resilience. I'll never forget what happened, but I won't let it define me either. I'm moving on wiser, stronger, and more cautious, but with a renewed sense of hope that I can rebuild a life based on truth and fairness. And that's the biggest lesson of all.